Have you ever paused and wondered if trust is really as pure and simple as we believe? What if the very act of trusting could be your greatest weakness, your most dangerous vulnerability? Throughout history, some of the sharpest minds and most cunning thinkers have warned us not to take trust lightly. And among them stands one man who has become almost legendary for his cold, unflinching view of human nature, Niccolo Machiavelli. His writings, his philosophy, and his unapologetic honesty about how the world truly works still echo 5 centuries later. In this video, we will uncover Machiavelli's brutally honest advice about trusting women and why his perspective forces us to rethink our most basic assumptions about love, loyalty, and betrayal. This isn't a moral lecture, nor is it a simple story. It is a journey into the mind of a man who understood power, manipulation, and the fragile nature of human trust better than almost anyone in history. So prepare yourself, because once you hear Machiavelli's perspective, you may never look at trust the same way again. Let's begin with Part 1. Part 1. The nature of trust in Machiavelli's eyes. Machiavelli lived during the chaotic years of Renaissance Italy, a time when cities were constantly at war, alliances shifted overnight, and betrayal was not the exception but the rule. In that environment, trust was not a virtue, it was a gamble. Machiavelli's most famous book, The Prince, is not about morality or fairness. It is about survival, control, and understanding how people truly behave when power, fear, and desire collide. To Machiavelli, human beings are not naturally loyal. They are not bound by some eternal sense of gratitude or honesty. Instead, they are guided by their own interests, emotions, and fears. He wrote that people will support you when it benefits them. But the moment circumstances change, their loyalty vanishes like smoke in the wind. Now, what does this mean when it comes to women and trust? For Machiavelli, relationships between men and women were not exempt from these harsh realities. He believed that love could be powerful, yes, but it was never reliable. He argued that affection and trust in personal relationships often blind men, making them weaker, more vulnerable, and easier to manipulate. Imagine a ruler, a man of power, who places absolute faith in the loyalty of someone close to him, maybe a lover, maybe a confidant. If that trust is betrayed, the cost is not just emotional heartbreak. It is political ruin, sometimes even death. This is why Machiavelli warned against unconditional trust, not because he despised women, but because he believed that human nature, male or female, was inconsistent, self-serving, and unpredictable. In his eyes, trust was never something to give freely. It was something to test, to guard, and to measure with suspicion. He believed that if a man trusted blindly, whether in politics or in love, he was setting himself up to be destroyed. This is why his advice feels so brutally honest even today. In a world where many of us are taught to believe in unconditional love and complete trust, Machiavelli reminds us that reality often tells a different story. He forces us to ask, do we trust because we want to believe in loyalty, or because loyalty is truly there? Part 2. The connection between power, desire, and betrayal. To truly understand Machiavelli's warning, we must look at the connection he drew between power, desire, and betrayal. He argued that human relationships, especially intimate ones, are rarely free from hidden motives. Desire, whether for love, wealth, or influence, often clouds judgment. It makes people promise more than they can give, and it blinds others into believing those promises. For Machiavelli, women in positions of influence were not exceptions to this rule. In fact, he saw desire and attraction as some of the most dangerous forces in human affairs. A man, no matter how strong, could lose his discipline, his caution, and even his empire if he allowed his emotions to control him. This doesn't mean Machiavelli thought women were uniquely manipulative. What he meant was that the dynamic between men and women could easily become a battlefield of power. With trust as the first casualty, the closer someone is to your heart, the more power they have to betray you, and the more devastating that betrayal becomes. Think of history's countless examples: kings ruined by their lovers, leaders misled by confidants, entire empires shaken because one person placed trust where it wasn't deserved. Machiavelli saw these stories not as rare tragedies but as predictable outcomes of human nature. He believed that desire makes people reckless, while betrayal is simply a natural response when self-interest outweighs loyalty. In his philosophy, betrayal is not shocking, it is expected. That is why he urged rulers, and by extension all of us, to think twice before giving complete trust to anyone, especially in matters where desire and passion are involved. So when Machiavelli says to be cautious about trusting women, he is not attacking women themselves. He is exposing the universal truth that in relationships, where passion and vulnerability run deepest, the danger of betrayal is always lurking, and those who fail to recognize this are often the ones who suffer the most. Part 3. Machiavelli's view of love as a weapon. Machiavelli did not romanticize love. In his world, love was not the sweet, eternal bond celebrated in poetry. Instead, it was a double-edged sword, powerful, yes, but dangerous if handled without caution. He believed that love, when mixed with trust, could weaken even the strongest man, and when that love turned into dependence, it could be used against him as a weapon. To Machiavelli, love was unstable because it rested on emotion, and emotions shift like the wind. He argued that people love as long as they are satisfied, as long as circumstances remain favorable. But when those conditions change, when sacrifice is demanded, when loyalty requires pain, love often vanishes. Now imagine a man who trusts too much in love. He believes promises will last forever, that devotion is stronger than ambition or temptation. But when reality strikes, when wealth, power, or passion offer something greater, betrayal becomes inevitable. For Machiavelli, this was not a rare exception. It was human nature. He compared love to fortune, a force that could elevate you one day and abandon you the next. Just as a ruler could not rely solely on fortune to secure his state, he argued that a man should not rely solely on love to secure loyalty. A wise man, he said, must anchor himself in caution, not blind affection. Here lies the uncomfortable truth. To Machiavelli, fear was a stronger bond than love. While love is voluntary and fragile, fear is instinctive and enduring. People may stop loving you, but they will hesitate to betray you if they fear the consequences. This principle applied not only to rulers but also to personal relationships. If you wished to avoid betrayal, you could not rely purely on love. You needed respect, boundaries, and sometimes even fear to preserve loyalty. That is why he warned men to think twice before trusting a woman, not because women were inherently untrustworthy, but because love, when combined with trust, made men blind to the possibility of manipulation. In his eyes, it was better to walk carefully, with guarded emotions, than to surrender blindly to passion. Part 4. Historical lessons of betrayal. Machiavelli's writings were not abstract theories. They were forged in the harsh reality of Renaissance Italy, a time when betrayal was almost routine. Alliances between cities were broken overnight. Generals turned against their kings, and families plotted against one another for power. Trusting the wrong person could mean losing your throne, your wealth, or your life. He often drew examples from history to illustrate his point. One of the most striking was the story of Cesare Borgia, a ruthless leader whom Machiavelli admired for his cunning. Borgia rose to power through a mixture of ambition, strategy, and calculated cruelty. But even Borgia, with all his brilliance, was betrayed when fortune turned against him, and those around him shifted their loyalties. Machiavelli also looked to the downfall of great rulers, who trusted their lovers or wives too completely. He saw in these stories the same recurring lesson. The closer someone is to your heart, the more dangerous their betrayal becomes. For ordinary men, this betrayal may result in heartbreak or financial loss. But for rulers, betrayal could topple entire kingdoms. Think of Helen of Troy, whose love ignited a war that destroyed an empire. Think of Antony, who followed Cleopatra into disaster, blinded by passion until his empire crumbled. These stories, though clothed in romance, are really tales of power, betrayal, and the ruin that follows when trust is misplaced. For Machiavelli, these were not cautionary tales for entertainment. They were brutal lessons about reality. He wanted his readers to see that betrayal was not extraordinary. It was ordinary, predictable, even inevitable when trust was given without question. So when he warns us to be cautious about trusting women, he is not painting them as villains of history. Instead, he is reminding us that human beings, regardless of gender, are guided by self-interest. Women simply became a powerful example because love makes men drop their guard. And once that guard is gone, betrayal strikes with devastating force. Part 5. Desire, Weakness, and the Fall of Great Men. To truly understand Machiavelli's point, we must explore how desire weakens men. He argued that desire makes men act against reason, against their own best interests. A man in love often surrenders his judgment, his discipline, even his power, in the hope of preserving affection. And this surrender is what opens the door to ruin. Throughout history, Machiavelli saw countless rulers who lost everything not because their armies were weak, not because their enemies were stronger, but because their desires controlled them. Desire made them reckless, blind, and vulnerable, and those who understood this weakness could exploit it with ease. In Machiavelli's philosophy, women symbolized this danger, not because they were inherently malicious, but because they often became the object of a man's uncontrollable desire. Once desire entered the equation, reason was pushed aside, and betrayal became almost inevitable. This is why Machiavelli's advice feels so cold, so unromantic, and yet so piercingly true. He reminds us that passion without caution leads to downfall. He urges men to see love not only as a source of joy but also as a potential trap. Consider how many men, even today, find themselves destroyed not by enemies on the battlefield, but by misplaced trust in personal relationships. Careers collapse, reputations shatter, and fortunes vanish because someone placed faith in promises that were never meant to be kept. Machiavelli would say this is not surprising. It is simply the nature of human desire. His warning, therefore, is timeless. If you wish to survive, if you wish to remain strong, you must not let desire make you blind. You must guard your trust as though it were your most valuable possession, because once it is betrayed, it cannot be recovered. Part 6. The Illusion of Loyalty. Machiavelli often warned that loyalty, much like love, is rarely permanent. He believed people are loyal only as long as loyalty benefits them. The moment circumstances shift, when profit, advantage, or survival demand otherwise, loyalty breaks, and betrayal follows. This view applied not only to soldiers and allies, but also to the most intimate relationships. A woman may appear loyal to a man while the conditions of love are comfortable, but when hardship comes, when sacrifices must be made, or when temptation offers a better path, that loyalty can vanish. Machiavelli saw this pattern repeatedly in history and concluded that loyalty is less a virtue and more an illusion created by circumstances. Consider the ruler who believes his allies will remain by his side. When fortune smiles, they cheer him. But when enemies rise or resources dwindle, those same allies abandon him, sometimes even plotting his destruction. Now, apply this same pattern to personal relationships. As long as comfort and happiness exist, loyalty feels strong. But when trials arise, the foundation of trust is tested, and often it crumbles. This is why Machiavelli taught rulers to prepare for betrayal before it happens. He urged them to rely on systems of control, discipline, and sometimes even fear, rather than simply trusting in loyalty. He argued that by expecting betrayal, one is never shocked by it. Instead, one is prepared. Applied to the subject of women, this becomes brutally clear. Machiavelli believed that a man should never place blind faith in loyalty born out of love, because once conditions change, loyalty may fade and betrayal will come. To survive, he advised men to remain cautious, even suspicious, and to recognize that trust, once broken, cannot be restored. Part 7. Trust, Power, and Self-Interest. At the heart of Machiavelli's philosophy lies one unshakable truth: self-interest rules human behavior. People act not out of moral duty, but out of what benefits them most. This principle guided his political teachings, and it also explains his warnings about trust in women. He believed that every human being, whether king or peasant, man or woman, acts in ways that serve their own interest first. Loyalty, affection, even sacrifice are offered only when they align with self-interest. Once that alignment breaks, so too does the relationship. For Machiavelli, the danger of trusting women was not about gender, but about proximity. Those closest to us hold the most power over us. A ruler could survive enemies from afar, but betrayal from within his own circle could destroy him overnight. Similarly, in personal life, betrayal by strangers may hurt, but betrayal by someone we love cuts deepest. This is why Machiavelli spoke so coldly about trust. He knew that when desire is involved, when love blinds reason, self-interest becomes harder to see. A man in love may believe promises are eternal. He may believe devotion is unshakable. Yet Machiavelli would argue, those promises last only as long as they serve the other person's needs. Thus, he urged men to see trust not as a virtue but as a calculated risk. To trust without testing, without caution, was to invite ruin. To guard one's heart and power was not cruelty but wisdom, because in a world governed by self-interest, trust is fragile and betrayal is always one step away. Ending. The cold truth that still matters today. And so, after exploring Machiavelli's philosophy, what lesson are we left with? It is not that women are uniquely untrustworthy, nor that love itself is an illusion. Rather, Machiavelli forces us to confront a reality that most of us prefer to ignore. Trust, whether in politics, in friendships, or in love, is never absolute. He reminds us that people are guided by self-interest, that loyalty is conditional, and that love, while powerful, is unstable. To trust blindly is to gamble with your future. To recognize the fragility of trust is not to abandon love or relationships, but to protect yourself from devastation when betrayal comes. Machiavelli's advice may feel cold, even cruel, but perhaps that is why it remains so powerful. He strips away illusions and exposes truths that many would rather not face. And his warning about trusting women is really a warning about trusting anyone without caution. It is a call to open your eyes to recognize human nature as it is, not as we wish it to be. So the next time you are tempted to place blind trust in someone, remember Machiavelli's words. Ask yourself, is this trust built on reality or on illusion? Is it grounded in strength or in vulnerability? Because once trust is broken, there is no going back. Machiavelli's voice from centuries ago still echoes in ours. Trust, but never without caution. Love, but never without reason. And above all, never give away your power in exchange for an illusion.